Now it's time for Deliverable 1.3, the first pass business plan. This is your first actual work product of the GSBI program. You're going to be working on your full business plan deck over the whole 10 months of GSBI. So in this deliverable, the idea isn't to have a completed deck by any means. It's a first pass on it. And even before you do that, the idea is to understand how we use the full business plan deck, what you're working towards, and having that big picture of how we'll be developing it over the 10 months, and then putting together a first pass on the deck that will be the basis for the future modules. So let me take a minute to talk about what the full plan deck is and isn't. First of all, it is a description of where your business is going and how you're going to get there. And it's designed for sharing with investors, typically in a small meeting, like a 1-hour meeting. And it's also got to be detailed enough to be read on its own. In other words, it's also something that you could share in a meeting, but it's also something that you could email to an investor as a follow-up or when you can't get a meeting with them. And the other thing it's used for in GSBI is it's the repository for your most current business plan. So during GSBI, each meeting with the mentors, each module, you're going to be refining that business plan. And so if you can make those changes in your business plan deck, then that will be very helpful to you so that you always have the latest business plan in one place and that everyone's looking at your latest vision for how the company is going to move forward. So with that in mind, the business plan deck has to be easy to update. And then what that also lets you do is having your latest business plan in one place, then you have a source for building shorter pitch decks. For example, for the GSBI in residence, when you need a 6-minute presentation or a 2-minute presentation, you have some place to pull from. Now, let me say what the business plan deck is not. So just to reinforce, it's not a pitch deck. So this is not something that you would get up on a big stage when you have 6 minutes or even 10 minutes in pitch. And it's also not typically a public document that you or we or anyone else would put out on the internet or anything like that. It's a private working document for your own internal use and for sharing selectively. The Deliverable 1.3 template has some suggested flow for what should be in your business plan outline and a possible order it could go in. And as you'll see here on the screen, these are the key topics and one flow that works well for many entrepreneurs. You don't have to use it, but you do have to make sure that all these points are covered. So the reason it works well is starting with mission and impact explains why you're doing what you're doing, what your big vision is for success, how you do it, then moving into the market opportunity, why this is needed, why it affects large numbers of people, and which segments you're trying to reach. Then that tees up very nicely the current status. In other words, where your enterprise is, how many people you've served, what capacity you have for scaling, what your financial situation is currently. Then once people understand that, now they understand the problem, how you're solving it, where your enterprise is, then you start to get very forward-looking. What's your growth plan? What's your vision for scaling? How are you going to get there? And then there's some details around the organization that typically people like to bring in later on about the team and things, the legal structures, and other investors. And from there, you can go to your fundraising goal, or what we call the justifiable ask that we'll be talking about a lot more, and say, by then, hey, this is where we're trying to go, this is the funding we need, please join us. And then typically we encourage entrepreneurs to have some backup slides that could be things like detailed financial statements or detailed technical slides about how your technology works that you wouldn't want to put into the main deck because they might take time away from the key parts about your business plan, but that you know that investors or other people you're meeting with are likely to ask about. So again, this flow has worked really well for most entrepreneurs. You don't have to use it just as it is, but it's a great flow and think about the story so that it moves along nicely. So here's a more detailed example outline. I won't go through it all now, but you'll see that for each of the 6 topic areas, they're about 3 to 6 slides each. And again, your exact order might change, but there's a lot you want to cover. So it all has to be very synthesized and high level. And you can expect that investors will want to drill down on certain points. But the best thing is to give that high level picture first and help them see how it all fits together, and then just let them drill down in the details of any area that they want to. So in the Deliverable 1.1 GSBI ARC video, you saw the presentation from Eric Sorensen at Carbon Roots International. And he was kind enough to share his full business plan deck with us to share with you. And we know that social entrepreneurs learn really well from examples of other social entrepreneurs. So I really suggest that you pause the video and look at his full deck, which is on the group site there, and you can download it, open it up, and use it as an example. But I should say, don't be intimidated. This deck is really good. It's one of the best that we've ever seen, which is, of course, why we're giving it to you as an example. But just remember that this is the product at the end of GSBI. We don't expect you to be anywhere close to that now. That's why it's something we're working towards. But again, pausing the video, taking some time to read through that deck will help you see what you're trying to work towards in your business plan. So before you start on your deck, I'd like to just take a minute and talk about some best practices that we've seen from the entrepreneurs we've worked with and what investors tell us as feedback. First of all, be really consistent with your numbers and facts throughout the deck. I can't tell you how often we see an entrepreneur that in one part of the deck they say we're addressing a market of 500,000 families, and then a few slides later it says something about 1 million families. And there may be a reason why those two numbers are different, or maybe one slide got updated and the other didn't. But what those kinds of inconsistencies do is it confuses the listener, because they're trying to figure out, well, was it 500,000 or is it 1 million, or is it the same or is it different? And they're not paying attention to the core message, which is what your business is and why they should invest in you. So just really keep an eye on that, because it's easy to let those discrepancies creep in, and just keep the story as simple and consistent as possible. Another thing is, we know that you're working in probably multiple currencies or currencies that aren't US dollars. But for purposes of this global audience, just keep all of your financial amounts in US dollars, even if it's what people pay or how much they save. Just keeping it all in US dollars, again, it lets the investor focus on your business and not have to do a lot of math in their mind, because that's just where most investors go, is to do math and conversions and things. The other thing is, as I mentioned, this is not a pitch deck. This is not a deck for presenting to a large group. It's for small personal meetings. So it's actually okay to have detailed charts. In your stage presentations, you of course want to have very few, you want to have graphics, but not charts and facts, and you want to have facts and figures, but not detailed charts. In this one, charts are actually a good thing, because it's a place where you can pause and the investor might have some questions and things. The other thing you'll see on Eric's, the Carbon Roots deck, that there are a lot of really nice photos and graphics that are really useful in helping to tell the story of the impact model and the business model and the financial plan and how all the economics work. That's something that we're working towards, but you have really until August to get those taken care of. So for now, don't worry too much about the photos or the graphics. If you've got some in your other decks, sure, put them in, but don't worry too much about trying to create those for now. We have plenty of time to work on that. What we want is to get the basic information in there, but the presentation will come later. The last piece of advice I'll give is that backup slides are really useful. You'll have some high-level financial slides. You'll have probably a high-level description of your technology. But if there are areas like detailed financials that you can put into in his backup slides, that can be very useful too, because then when you're giving an investor meeting, you don't have to open up a separate document. You can just go right into that slide and pull up things in response to the questions you're likely to get. Same thing about your technology. A lot of a lot of you have really wonderful technology and some great intellectual property, maybe patents and some very cool information. But typically, you don't need to spend too much time talking about that in the main deck. But it's an area that investors often want to drill down on and ask more questions. So you can have some prepared backup slides that you can pull up in response to questions and answers. Okay, so as I said, the goal is to have this wonderful, complete, ready to present to investors full business plan deck. But that doesn't come for a few months yet. But for this module, over the next 3 weeks, the deliverable is to, first of all, review the full business plan outline sample deck and the outline we've provided, compare it to your best, most up-to-date business plan, and to the extent possible, use your business plan as a starting point, and then look at what are things that we're asking for in the outline that you don't have in your deck that could be added in. And if you can easily add those in, add them in. If it's something that you don't have the information at hand or need to work on as part of your GSBI experience, then simply just putting in a placeholder slide to start to think about that as a gap and where it might go in the presentation, that's perfectly fine for now. So again, this shouldn't be a huge job. We're not expecting you to go back and completely redo your deck. If you've got a good business plan, use that as a starting point. Don't start with our template if you think what you have is good and something you can talk to your mentors about. And once you have that draft deck done, then you can upload it to your subgroup in-group site so that your mentors can see it and also the GSBI team can review it.